Good morning, grade 10. This is the topic for the last week, number 4, about heredity, inheritance, and variation, specifically about DNA and RNA. So, in other words, we will be dealing about the DNA and the RNA. For the skills and competency, you are going to explain how a protein is made using information from the DNA. Let us define first nucleic acids. What are nucleic acids? Nucleic acids are the main information carrying molecules of the cell, and by directing the process of protein synthesis, they determine the inherited characteristics of every living things. You have learned that the important thing to determine the characteristics of every living things are by means of nucleic acids. There are two main classes of nucleic acids. Number one is for the DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is the genetic material found in all living organisms, ranging from single-celled bacteria to multicellular mammals. So most of or all of the living organisms have DNA or deoxyribonucleic acids, which is the genetic material. It is found in the nucleus and in the chloroplasts and mitochondria for eukaryotes. And for the prokaryotes, it is found in the cytoplasm, freely floating. DNA is a double-stranded structure. It is a double helix or two-stranded helix. However, ribonucleic acid or RNA are the nucleic acids involved in protein synthesis. So the primary purpose of the ribonucleic acid is for protein synthesis. It is a single-stranded structure. If you are going to differentiate the structure of the DNA and RNA, the DNA has two strands, while the RNA has only one strand. And in terms of location, the DNA is found in the nucleus for eukaryotes and in the cytoplasm for prokaryotes, while RNA is found mainly in the cytoplasm. Nucleotides. Nucleotides are monomers of DNA and RNA. It is combined with each other to form polynucleotide. And this polynucleotide are what we call as DNA and RNA. So when monomers combine with each other, for example, a monomer of DNA to another monomer of DNA and to another monomer of DNA, forms a polynucleotide or the DNA itself. And same thing with RNA, monomer of RNA combined with another form of a monomer of itself can be formed a polynucleotide RNA. It is made up of three components: the nitrogenous base, a pentose, a 5-carbon sugar, and a phosphate group. So again, the three components of the nucleotides are the nitrogenous base, a pentose sugar or 5-carbon sugar, and a phosphate group. So this comprises the nucleotides. Three parts of a nucleotide. This phosphate group, this one is a phosphate group. then the phosphate group is connected to a pentose sugar. So the sugar in the deoxyribonucleic acid is different from the sugar in the ribonucleic acid. And this sugar is connected to a nitrogenous base. Okay? So again, phosphate group connected to a pentose sugar, and the pentose sugar is connected to the nitrogenous base. Now, these three components is now the nucleotide. Okay. Nitrogenous bases. What are the nitrogenous bases? There are 4 nitrogenous bases in the DNA and RNA. Number 1 is cytosine. Number 2 is guanine. Number 3, adenine. And number 4, thymine. Thymine for DNA and uracil for RNA. So, in other words, these 3 nitrogenous bases are the same in both DNA and RNA. However, the thymine is only found in the DNA. This thymine is being replaced by uracil in RNA. So, walang thymine sa RNA. Ang thymine ay nasa DNA lang. Ang uracil ang nasa RNA naman. So, the symbol for this cytosine is simply C, letter C, the first letter of cytosine. And then guanine is letter G, adenine is A, thymine is T for DNA, and uracil is U for RNA. These are the nitrogenous bases. Yan. So, ito lang yan, the nitrogenous base. Dito lang siya. So, ibig sabihin, may complementary pairing sa nitrogenous bases. Ito. The cytosine is always paired, etong cytosine na to, is always paired with guanine. Sila yung magkapares. And then, the adenine naman, sa thymine naman, kung DNA. Adenine is paired with thymine, pero pag nasa RNA na ang adenine, ay nagpe-pair sa uracil. So, yan ang complementary pairing of the nitrogenous bases. Next is pentose sugar or 5-carbon sugar. This pentose sugar is attached to nitrogenous base and phosphate group, prime number of the carbon sugar. Yan. For the DNA, the pentose sugar is called as deoxyribose. Ito yung tawag sa sugar ng DNA, deoxyribose. Okay? In RNA, the sugar is called as ribose. Okay? Remember that. DNA, sugar is deoxyribose. RNA naman is ribose. Now, looking at the same image dito, this is the pentose sugar. Why pentose? When we say pentose, 5 carbon siya. From the word pentagon, 5 sides. Pentose, 5 carbon. Yan. So, this is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth carbon. Yan. Yung mga corners na yan. Okay. Lahat yan carbon. So, sabi dito, the pentose sugar is attached to nitrogenous base. Yan, this is the pentose sugar attached to the nitrogenous base. And also attached to phosphate group, yung prime number of the carbon sugar. This is the prime number. Yan, of the carbon sugar. So, yan naka-attach dyan. Tandaan lang, ang phosphate naka-attach sa carbon sugar or pentose. Then, ang nitrogenous base naman, naka-attach din sa pentose sugar. Okay. Number 3 is phosphate group. Phosphate group is a molecular group consisting of a central phosphorus atom bound to 4 oxygen atoms. Yan. This is the phosphate group. The center is the P, a symbol for phosphorus, then bonded to 4 oxygen atoms. Yan. So, this one, yan, oxygen, another oxygen, oxygen, and then another one. So, ang phosphorus, nasa center siya. Nakakombine siya sa 4 na oxygen atoms. Three general classes of RNA molecules. Ito tayo sa RNA. What are the 3 general classes of RNA molecules? So, mas malaki na siya kasi molecules na. Number 1 is messenger RNA. In short, mRNA. That is the symbol for messenger RNA. These molecules that carry the coding sequences for protein synthesis and are called transcripts. Molecule siya na nagdadala ng coding sequences for protein synthesis. Since RNA tayo, the main role of RNA is for protein synthesis. Now, these coding sequences are called as transcripts. Okay. Then the second one is ribosomal RNA or rRNA. Small r, then we have the capitalized RNA. These molecules that form the core of a cell's ribosomes. From the name itself, ribosomal, these molecules form the core of a cell's ribosomes, the structure in which protein synthesis takes place. So, dito nangyayari sa cells ribosomes yung protein synthesis. And the last one, or the last class of RNA molecule is the transfer RNA or tRNA. Ito na yun. The symbol small t, then capitalized RNA. These molecules that carry amino acids to the ribosomes during protein synthesis. Siya naman yung nagdadala ng amino acids sa ribosomes during protein synthesis. Okay? So, ulitin natin, messenger RNA, siya yung nagdadala ng coding sequences na tinatawag na transcripts para sa pag-synthesize ng protein. Ang ribosomal RNA naman, siya naman yung nagpo-form molecules that form the core of a cell's ribosomes. Yan. Kasi dito na nangyayari yung protein synthesis. And then the transfer RNA or tRNA, siya naman yung nagdadala, carry amino acids. Nagdadala ng mga amino acids sa ribosomes during protein synthesis. So, yan ang tatlo. mRNA, ribosomal RNA or rRNA, and transfer RNA or tRNA. Yung mRNA, yan yung messenger RNA. Okay, transcription. Transcription is the synthesis of RNA from a DNA template, where the code in the DNA is converted into a complementary RNA code. So, dito sa transcription, nagkakaroon ng transcribing ng code from DNA ng organism, yung DNA ng organism, tinatranscribe during synthesis of RNA and is converted into complementary RNA code. So, nangyayari na dito yung pairing sa RNA. Okay. How about translation? Translation is the synthesis of a protein from an mRNA template where the code in the mRNA is converted into an amino acid sequence in a protein. So after transcription, translation happens or takes place. Nakasunod yung translation. After ng coding from DNA to RNA or mRNA, yung mRNA naman is converted into an amino acid sequence in a protein. So this is the second base. Ito na po yun. Ito yung table na to. The first base, second base, and third base. So dito, ito yung mga translated mRNA. Then, etong columns na to, itong mga names na to, yan yung mga amino acids. Yan. Amino acids. Okay. These are the amino acids. Okay. Answer the following. Activity 1, getting to know the DNA and RNA, page 3 of the last. Activity number 2, color and pair me up, page 4. And activity 3, DNA transcription to translation, pages 4 to 5. So dito sa na activity number 1, getting to know the DNA and RNA, the difference between the DNA and RNA. Here in activity 2, you will just color the image. Color and pair me up. Yan. Then for activity 3, the DNA transcription to translation. This is more complicated than the first two activities. To provide you a sample for activity number 3 about DNA transcription to translation, I have here the codes or the nitrogenous bases in the DNA of an organism. So these codes or nitrogenous bases will be transcribed in the transcription process in the mRNA synthesis, protein synthesis. Remember that adenine is always paired with thymine. Ang adenine, na-prepare siya sa thymine dito sa DNA. But this time, the DNA nitrogenous bases will be transcribed into RNA in the mRNA. So therefore, adenine will not be paired with thymine, but this will be paired with uracil. Tandaan, ang adenine kapag sa kapag sa RNA, ang adenine ay nagpe-pair sa uracil. Hindi na po sa thymine. Kasi ang thymine nasa DNA. Ang kapalit ng thymine sa RNA ay uracil. So in short, adenine is always paired with uracil in RNA. Okay? And then for the guanine is always paired with cytosine. Even in DNA, kahit nasa DNA or kahit nasa RNA, palagi silang magka-pair. Then, ang adenine ulit, magpe-pair sa uracil. Now, this pairing or coding, matatranslate siya by translation process or by means of tRNA codons. Ito yung codons na. Okay? So, babalik ka ulit dito, uracil. Ano ang ka-pair ng uracil sa RNA? Adenine ulit. And then, cytosine, guanine. And uracil, adenine. Okay? Now, looking for the amino acids, dito kayo magbe-base. Diyan kayo magbe-base. Para makita kung anong amino acid siya. Okay? Now, this UCU, kung titingnan nyo sa table, ang amino acid is serine. Okay? Let us look at the table. UCU. So, hanapin natin yung UCU kung nasaan siya. Okay? UCU. This is serine. So, nandito siya. Okay? UCU. So, ang first base is U. Dito ka titingin. First base. U. Second base. Dito. C. Then, third base. Nasa U siya. Dito. Kaya, ang tawag dito ay serine. Okay? Serine ang amino acid. Another example is the GGA or guanine, guanine, adenine. So, guanine is paired with cytosine, another guanine for cytosine, and adenine for uracil. Okay? Then, sa tRNA codons, babalik ko ulit. Cytosine, magpe-pair siya sa guanine, another cytosine sa guanine, and uracil sa adenine. So, eto ulit ang titingnan nyo, CCU. Tingnan nyo kung ano ang amino acid niya, CCU, sa table. This is proline. Okay? Tingnan natin. You have CCU. Hanapin natin dito. First base C, second base C, yan, and third base U. So, para mas madali, titingnan nyo kung pasunod-sunod. First base muna, then second base, then third base. So, CCU is proline. Okay? Next is for CTG. Cytosine, thymine, guanine. The mRNA code is guanine, adenine, cytosine. Guanine paired with cytosine. Thymine is paired with adenine. And guanine for cytosine. The tRNA codons is CUG or cytosine, uracil, guanine. Okay? If you look at this, magkaiba na siya, di ba? Compared to the first two examples. Yung first two examples, halos bumalik lang sa dati. Di ba? Yan. Eto, kung titingnan nyo. tRNA, AGA, AGA yung DNA. Yung dito, GGA, pareho din. However, here, titingnan nyo, magkaiba na. CUG, CTG. Bakit naging CUG? Remember that it is in the RNA. Kung RNA, walang thymine dyan. Instead, uracil ang magpe-pair sa adenine. So, guanine, pareho pa din, cytosine, ayan. Then, ang adenine, magpe-pair siya sa uracil, not thymine. Then, cytosine for guanine. Ang amino acid is aspartic acid. For the last code, CCT, the code is, complementary code is GGA. Guanine, guanine, adenine. Then, for the tRNA codons, it will become CCU. Cytosine, cytosine, uracil. Cytosine paired with guanine. Another cytosine is paired with another guanine. And then here in adenine, adenine is being paired with uracil since we are now still in the RNA synthesis. And looking at the amino acid, ang amino acid na to, yan, ang code na to, ang amino acid is glycine. Okay? So I hope I gave you the needed information to understand the lesson and to be able to for you to answer or accomplish the activities. If you have queries, just PM me or chat in the GC, Science GC. Yan. Thank you very much and God bless us all.